as Ambassador Dang mentioned, I'm an adjunct faculty here at York University at the Schulich School of Business. I've been part of the York community for the last 15 years as a student, also as a faculty member, and also as a staff member. So a long time involvement here with York, and there's been many connections with Sudan and South Sudan through the Center of Refugee Studies and other activities here at the university. And I think what hopefully I can offer in a few brief remarks this morning is some perspective of a researcher from a Canadian university, also with some links to U.S. University as well, with my research fellowship at the University of Michigan. On the perspectives that I have had working with South Sudanese colleagues, and from a recent visit to Juba 3 weeks ago, also in Nairobi. So my remarks will be informed by a recent visit and also through the great partnerships that I've had the opportunity to work with. They include Susan McGrath and Almani Al-Jack, previously at York with Almani and now also in the U.S., more of those cross-border connections. We've been to Khartoum together as part of a conference that was organized there, looking at enterprise-focused, job creation-focused approaches to post-conflict reconstruction. And that work has been carried on in various ways here at York University. Also had the great privilege to work with Dr. Odwa Atari, who's here with us this morning. He's a professor at Nipissing University. And research that Odwa has led, that others were a part of, was looking at the capacity of technical and vocational training in South Sudan, the physical infrastructure as well as the curriculum, and what the current assessment of the situation was and what would need to happen in order to build the capacity for technical and vocational training in South Sudan. And most recently, I was in Juba and in Nairobi with the president of Cape Breton University in Canada. He was formerly here at York University and worked closely with the Center of Refugee Studies, David Wheeler. He has done work in Sudan for the last 30 years, since the early 1980s, where he was involved in Darfur in water projects there. There were partnerships with Afad University in Khartoum that have been ongoing. And now, together we traveled to South Sudan to, again, coming both from more of a business and entrepreneurship and an enterprise background, we were looking at the current capacity for teaching and training entrepreneurship and the potential for developing small and medium-sized businesses in South Sudan, especially focused on agriculture because so many people make their livelihoods from agricultural activities. So this is some of the background that I'll just draw on briefly to make some of my remarks this morning. I also have had the personal privilege to work in 12 different African countries across the continent over the last 20 years, including with the United Nations Development Program and the International Finance Corporation. And most of that work, again, was coming from a business perspective. How can jobs be created? How can local enterprises be created? How can entrepreneurship training be supported to create self-reliant local livelihood activities and economic development? So this is part of what we were doing in Juba when we were there 3 weeks ago. We were launching a piece of research that was funded by DFID in the UK, and David Wheeler from Cape Breton University was part of that research. It was looking at entrepreneurship training in East Africa. And the countries profiled were Kenya, Tanzania, and South Sudan, kind of taking the whole range of capacity from one of the strongest countries, Kenya, to one, South Sudan, that perhaps still needs the most development. And certainly we were very, obviously South Sudan, there's so much to be done, given the history there. But at the same time, there are many South Sudanese young entrepreneurs that are taking up the challenge of creating new agricultural businesses. And we spoke to a number of them when we were there, and also to some of the small organizations that are supporting these entrepreneurs. So we spoke with people starting up dairy companies, with bakeries, with groundnut paste processing organizations, and also with organizations that were supporting these entrepreneurs through business planning competitions, through funding, through loans, and also through, I think most importantly, networking and mentorship. Because there's a certain amount of knowledge you can perhaps gain through formal education, but if you're talking about starting a business, most of the learning comes from actually trying it and doing it and being mentored and supported by others who are entrepreneurs and business people. So this was happening, and one of the sources of funding that we're looking at leveraging from the Canadian side is the IDRC, the International Development Research Center, has a big focus on food security. Obviously, South Sudan with important needs in that area, but not our interest is not on the emergency and aid basis, which is also very important, but the more long-term sustainable basis of how do you promote development of agricultural industries and jobs in the country. Obviously, starting from the support of these young entrepreneurs that we met with. So there's $5 million grants that are being made available by the Canadian government, and we're working in partnership with the University of Juba and with other, with ODWA and Nipissing University and York University, to put together proposals to see how we can continue to support those entrepreneurs and other agricultural entrepreneurs in South Sudan, so that food security can be addressed hopefully in a long-term sustainable way that also builds jobs and economic growth in the country. And certainly any partners from universities around the world, in Canada and beyond, would be welcome partners in this activity. Interestingly, also while we were in Juba, we also looked at the health situation. Of course, South Sudan, as many of us know, has some of the highest rates of infant mortality and maternal mortality in the world. And there's the interesting connection there that South Sudan has with Canada, with the Cuban-trained doctors who became trained in Cuba, then then came to Canada in the late 90s and early 2000s. Were supported here until South Sudan, the peace agreement, and a number of them were able to move back. And they were supported by the University of Calgary and other organizations and institutions. And now many of them have gone back, but still the constraints and the resources are so limited. So another project that we're looking at is how we can provide, again, a kind of a management system support, logistics support to clinics and doctors and nurses in South Sudan to support the delivery of healthcare there. So certainly from the perspective, I think, of myself and others that I've had the privilege to work with, of course there's so many challenges there, but yet we, in the research that we're trying to move forward, also taking a very practical approach, a very action-oriented approach to support development in agriculture and health in various areas, but also at the same time generating some knowledge that can be more widely shared and practically useful to others. So I think I can conclude my comments there. Certainly many challenges, but also there are lots of opportunities, and they include the inspiring young entrepreneurs of South Sudan themselves that are really, have in some cases have moved back from the diaspora in Kenya and Uganda and elsewhere, probably from more stable situations, but yet they're so deeply committed to rebuilding their country, and doing it in a way that they're taking on risk. That they haven't gone back to take government jobs They've gone back to, I think, do a very difficult but yet very inspiring type of work. So it's the interest of many partners that we met to try to support people like this in whatever way we can. So thank you, Eric.